Breaking news today: the dangerous misconceptions about the West that Vladimir Putin has. Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, has repeatedly said that the West wants to see Russia split up. This is a compelling argument for keeping the war going even for those Russians who are uncomfortable with Putin's aggression toward Ukraine. Russians who have lost loved ones in the conflict in Ukraine or who are struggling as a result of Western economic sanctions would be worse off if the country were to be torn apart. Fighting Ukrainians backed by the West in Ukraine is preferable to fighting them and each other within Russia, so goes the argument. In a statement released at the height of the June Wagner Group mutiny, group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin claimed that Ukraine posed no real threat to Russia and that it was Russia's greedy generals who made the claim. Putin could have avoided responsibility for the war and ended it with the help of Prigozhin if he had adopted this line of thinking. Because Putin has so much at stake in the conflict, he is neither able nor willing to end the fighting. However, Prigozhin's fame and candor, as well as the lack of resistance to his mutiny from the regular Russian security forces, suggest that his skepticism of the conflict in Ukraine is shared by a larger segment of the Russian population. If only they could be convinced that Western countries are not secretly plotting Russia's dissolution. Putin has no reason to dispute this as the West's goal, and doing so would destroy the justification for his war in Ukraine. Putin will keep fighting in Ukraine and be antagonistic to the United States and the West as long as he is in power. However, Putin's rule will not last forever. The lack of resistance to the Wagner mutiny demonstrates that his removal is a distinct possibility. Those with the power to remove him from office, however, are unlikely to do so if they believe the West will use this opportunity to engineer the very Russian dissolution Putin has repeatedly warned against. We don't know who Putin's potential successors are, but the West must make it clear to them that this is not their goal. The United States, other Western governments, and even Ukraine will need to articulate a vision of a future Russia that they would like to see that is not just acceptable, but even appealing to Russians if the idea that the West is not a threat to Russia is to take hold within Russia, and especially within the security forces that could oust Putin. Inmate Alexei Navalny, who has been jailed for opposing Putin, has already articulated a highly positive vision of a future Russia that Western governments could endorse. The beautiful Russia of the future, that is free, democratic, and at peace with its neighbors and the West. Putin is a firm believer in the idea that the democratic color revolutions were actually US-led operations to overthrow pro-Moscow regimes and replace them with pro-Washington ones, regardless of their actual outcomes. According to Putin, submitting to the United States and the West is the same as embracing democracy, or at least the illusion of democracy. Therefore, the United States and other Western governments must make clear to the Russian public and security forces that, while they support the spread of democracy in Russia, they do not expect a democratic Russia to join the European Union or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Both organizations would be beneficial to Western governments, and the West should make it clear that it is eager to work with a democratic Russia on the model of India, Brazil, Indonesia, or South Africa. These states pursue their own foreign policies of independence while working with the West in areas of mutual interest and are generally democratic. But the West doesn't need Russia to join the democracies at all. Having Russia be autocratic while also being at peace with its neighbors and the West would certainly meet our needs. However, Western governments must signal what they want from and are willing to provide to Russia in return for a peaceful Russia, whether democratic or autocratic. The West demands that Russia immediately cease hostilities against Ukraine and remove its troops from occupied Ukrainian territory. As a result, the West should lift its trade restrictions on Russia over the Ukraine conflict and resume normal relations with Russia. Russia should compensate Ukraine for the harm Putin's policies have caused after the war ends. However, a post-Putin Russia that shows restraint toward Ukraine and its other neighbors should receive economic support from the West. First and foremost, Western governments should make it clear that they are in favor of maintaining Russian territory just as much as they are of restoring Ukraine's. What role could Western propaganda play in bringing about the beautiful Russia of the future? Many people will be quick to point out, however, that this is not necessarily the case. However, this might not occur if there is no such communication. For even if there are those in the security services or the oligarch class who recognize that continuing the war in Ukraine is not in Russia's interests, such as Prigozhin, they are more likely to stand by Putin, or someone like him, if they fear the alternative will be worse for Russia and for them. The West must send a message to Putin's potential successors that they can expect peace with Russia if Moscow is willing to make peace with its neighbors.